The suburban neighborhood of Chicago was wrapped in autumn twilight. My phone buzzed as I finished my shift at the pediatric ward. I'm Elaine Westbrook, 35, a pediatric nurse with too many responsibilities and not enough hours in the day. I checked my notifications and saw an email with a fancy digital invitation. My stomach tightened. It was from my younger sister, Brooke. I've always been compared to Brooke. Since childhood, this pattern never changed. I was the serious, responsible one, raised to meet my parents' expectations as the model eldest daughter. Brooke, 5 years younger, grew up bright, active, and bursting with confidence. Our parents often told me, "You should learn from Brooke," while giving her the freedom I never had. "I'm home," I called out as I stepped through the door, and 7-year-old Caleb came running from the hallway, his eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, today I drew a dinosaur at school. The teacher said mine was the best." His small face beamed with pride, making my exhaustion melt away. I smiled, stroking his soft hair. "That's wonderful. Will you show me?" From the kitchen, I could see 10-year-old Lily working diligently on her homework, and my husband Matthew had just returned from work, loosening his tie while making coffee. A perfect family portrait right before my eyes. My heart swelled with pride at the home we'd built during our 15 years of marriage, even as my nursing job stretched me thin. "Any interesting notifications?" Matthew asked, glancing at my phone. I held up the screen showing the lavish digital wedding website. "It's from Brooke." "Oh," he said. I opened the invitation link and froze at the announcement page with its elegant animation. "She's engaged to Jackson Pierce, the developer." Matthew raised his eyebrows, looking somewhat surprised. "He's a big shot in the industry, isn't he?" I nodded, scrolling through the expensively designed website with its countdown timer and RSVP portal. Jackson Pierce was a successful real estate developer well known in Chicago business circles. "The wedding is in 3 months. The invitation includes our whole family." That night, after tucking the children in bed, I sat cross-legged on our bed, staring at Brooke's engagement photos on Instagram. She always seemed to be one step ahead, graduating top of her class from law school, working as an associate at a prestigious law firm, and now marrying a successful businessman. Her post showcased a perfect life, with that massive diamond ring prominently displayed. Matthew came out of the shower, steam following him, and noticed my expression. "What's got you so focused?" "Just Brooke," I sighed, putting down my phone. "Everything always works out for her." Matthew sat beside me, his weight shifting the mattress. "You have a wonderful life too, a fulfilling job helping children, 2 amazing kids, and me." He winked, trying to lighten my mood. I smiled weakly. "I know, but what?" He tilted his head. "Nothing," I said, closing Instagram. "I'm just tired from my shift." The next morning, I video called Brooke while preparing for work. "Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you." Brooke's perfectly made up face filled my screen, her excitement palpable. "I can't believe it." "He's perfect. You'll help with the wedding preparations, right? We're sisters after all." I smiled, packing Caleb's lunch with one hand. "Of course. Just tell me what you need." "Wonderful. Lunch tomorrow at Bellini's?" "I want to tell you all the details." I mentally rearranged my shift schedule. "That sounds good. I'm looking forward to it." After hanging up, mixed emotions churned inside me. I was genuinely happy for my sister, but at the same time, an uncomfortable feeling settled in my chest. I reflected on my own marriage. 15 years ago, Matthew and I had married for love. The first few years were passionate, but after the children came, our life settled into a predictable routine. Nothing was particularly wrong, but somewhere along the way, the thrill had faded. At Bellini's the next day, Brooke was radiant in designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She shared every detail from how she met Jackson to the elaborate proposal, showing me her wedding Pinterest boards and venue options on her tablet. I listened attentively while picking at my overpriced salad. "Elaine, I've always wanted to be like you," Brooke suddenly said, putting down her mimosa. "You were always Mom and Dad's pride." I nearly choked on my water. "Me? But you're the one with the impressive career and glamorous life." Brooke shook her head, her perfect highlights catching the light. In my career, maybe, but you have what I've always wanted: a stable, happy family. A husband who adores you. Children who look up to you. Those words left me pensive as I drove back to the hospital for my afternoon shift. The sister I had been envying was actually envying me. Ironically, I had recently begun feeling something was off in what I thought was my perfect family. Matthew had been distant lately, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. Several weeks passed, and I divided my time between hospital shifts and helping with Brooke's increasingly elaborate wedding preparations. The wedding website grew more complex by the day, with designer registries and a custom hashtag. Between work and family responsibilities, I was stretched thin. One night, as I was tucking Caleb into bed, he looked up at me with serious eyes. "Mom, I don't like Jackson," he said unexpectedly. "Why not?" I asked, surprised as I kissed his forehead. "Because he acts weird with his phone," Caleb whispered. "When he sees me, he turns it off or puts it away super fast, like he's hiding something bad." I smiled reassuringly, though something about his observation made me uneasy. "I'm sure that's not the case, sweetie. Jackson is a busy businessman who deals with confidential information. It's probably just your imagination." Caleb didn't seem convinced, but said nothing more. I told myself not to worry too much about a child's intuition. It was probably just stress from the wedding preparations affecting everyone. Later that evening, I arrived home from a late shift to find Matthew scrolling intently on his phone in the living room. When I entered, he quickly locked the screen and put it face down. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, hanging up my coat. "Oh, just a work email," Matthew answered, looking somewhat uneasy as he pocketed his phone. "Sorry, I didn't start dinner. The Henderson project is running behind schedule." I noticed Matthew had been coming home late more often lately. Sometimes he would disappear on weekends for emergency site visits. I told myself it was just the stress of Brooke's wedding making me paranoid. Our family was happy. At least that's what I wanted desperately to believe. The day before the wedding, the upscale hotel lobby buzzed with activity as final preparations for the rehearsal dinner took shape. I had just finished coordinating with the hotel staff about Caleb's food allergies. The children were supposed to be swimming in the hotel's indoor pool. As I crossed the lobby checking my schedule on my phone, something caught my eye through the large windows facing the valet area. Caleb was wandering around Jackson's luxury SUV. He was peering at Jackson's phone through the driver's window as if looking for something. My heart skipped a beat, and I hurried outside. "Caleb, what are you doing?" I approached my son, trying to keep my voice calm. "You shouldn't be looking into other people's cars without permission." Caleb turned around, looking startled, his small hands quickly moving behind his back. "Mom, I was just checking something." "Checking what?" I pressed gently. Caleb kicked at the pavement with his toe. "Nothing," he mumbled, his eyes avoiding mine. I was puzzled but didn't pursue it further, not wanting to create drama before the rehearsal dinner. "It's time to take a shower. We need to get ready for the dinner tonight." That evening, the rehearsal dinner went smoothly, with relatives from both families enjoying cocktails and conversation. However, I couldn't help noticing Matthew checking his phone repeatedly throughout the dinner. At one point, his phone vibrated, and he excused himself to take a call in the hallway. When he returned, I asked, "Is everything okay?" "Oh, just a small problem at the Henderson site," Matthew answered lightly, his cologne somehow stronger than when he'd left. "I need to video call the project manager tonight." "I'm sorry, Elaine. I know the wedding is tomorrow, but it's an emergency. I'll be back in a couple of hours," he added, not quite meeting my eyes. I was disappointed, but didn't argue. Matthew was an executive at a construction company with significant responsibilities. I showed understanding, as I always did. "All right, I'll take the kids back to the room first." Back in the hotel room, Caleb was quieter than usual. Lily was absorbed in a game on her tablet, but Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, his chin resting on his small knees, deep in thought. "What's wrong, Caleb?" I sat next to my son, concerned by his unusual stillness. "When is Dad coming back?" he asked, his voice small. "As soon as he finishes his work call. It's an important day tomorrow, so you should get some sleep soon." Caleb was silent for a moment, then suddenly asked, "Is Jackson a good person?" I was taken aback by the question. Of course. Why do you ask? Because. Caleb hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his pajama sleeve. Never mind. I kissed his forehead, pushing away my own unease. Don't overthink things. Come on, let's brush your teeth and get ready for bed. After the children had fallen asleep, Matthew still hadn't returned. I called his cell phone several times, but only got his voicemail. I checked our family location app, but his phone seemed to be turned off. Around midnight, the door finally opened, and Matthew came in, smelling faintly of scotch. "I'm sorry I'm so late," he said in a low voice, avoiding my eyes. The problem was more complicated than I expected. I studied my husband's face in the dim light. He seemed tired, but also somehow on edge, his movements too careful. "Is everything all right?" I asked, my nurse's instincts picking up subtle signs of discomfort. "Yes, we managed to resolve it," Matthew said, loosening his tie with practiced fingers. "Why are you still up?" "You should get some sleep before tomorrow's events." "I was waiting for you," I replied, but anxiety was spreading through my chest like an invisible stain. Something wasn't right, and I could no longer pretend not to notice. The morning of the wedding day arrived with perfect weather and frantic activity. The hotel buzzed with coordinators and vendors rushing about. I stood in Brooke's luxury suite, already dressed in my sage green bridesmaid dress, helping my sister prepare. Brooke looked stunning in her designer wedding gown, its intricate beadwork catching the light as she twirled before the mirror. Her makeup artist and hairstylist fussed over final touches while the wedding photographer captured every moment. "I can't believe this day has finally come," Brooke said, her voice trembling with excitement as she looked out the window at the perfectly manicured venue grounds. "Elaine, thank you so much. This day wouldn't have happened without you." I hugged my sister carefully, avoiding her perfectly styled hair. "If you're happy, that's all that matters." The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Flowers, music, lighting, everything was picture perfect. Instagram-worthy moments unfolded one after another under the elegantly draped pavilion. However, throughout the ceremony, I couldn't help noticing Matthew exchanging glances with my sister several times across the aisle. At one point, it even looked like he winked at Brooke when he thought no one was watching. Was it just a friendly gesture from brother-in-law to bride? I told myself my imagination was running wild. But when I glanced back at the family row, I saw Caleb holding Lily's tablet, recording something. He normally showed little interest in technology unless it involved dinosaur games. I signaled with my eyes for him to put the device away, but Caleb just looked at me solemnly, then continued whatever he was doing. As the reception began and champagne toasts filled the air, I noticed Brooke heading toward the ladies' lounge. Thinking she might need help with her dress, I followed discreetly. When I turned the corner into the dimly lit corridor, an astonishing sight stopped me in my tracks. Matthew was waiting outside the lounge as Brooke emerged. After a brief exchange of whispers, he placed his hand on her bare arm and leaned in to murmur something in her ear. Their faces were much too close, their expressions intimate in a way that sent ice through my veins. This was clearly more than just a conversation between in-laws. I instinctively stepped behind a decorative column, my heart hammering so loudly I feared they would hear it. They separated quickly, walking away in different directions without noticing me. On trembling legs, I made my way back to the reception, my mind reeling. Something was deeply wrong, but this was my sister's wedding day. I forced my face into a smile and pretended nothing had happened. After dinner, when the dancing began and the lights dimmed, I returned to our family table and noticed Caleb hunched over Lily's tablet, his small face unusually serious as he swiped through something on the screen. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Caleb looked up at me, his eyes showing a heaviness no 7-year-old should carry. "I'll tell you later," he whispered, clutching the tablet protectively against his chest. Although anxiety clawed at my throat, I nodded. "Okay," I said, stroking his hair gently. On the reception dance floor, the first dance between Brooke and Jackson had just ended to enthusiastic applause. Brooke was radiant in her gown, and Jackson looked at her with unmistakable adoration. The wedding DJ's voice boomed over the speakers as spotlights swept across the dance floor. Next, we have a special dance with the bride's sister, Elaine Westbrook, and her husband Matthew. With a deep breath, I stood and headed to the dance floor where Matthew waited, his smile perfect and practiced. He placed one hand on my waist and took my hand with the other. The music began, and we moved slowly in time with the romantic ballad. "You look beautiful," Matthew said softly, his breath warm against my ear. "That dress really suits you." I tried to smile naturally, but my heart felt like lead in my chest. "Thank you." Matthew pulled me closer, his cologne overwhelming. "Is something bothering you?" "No, nothing," I lied, avoiding his eyes. From across the room, I could see Brooke laughing with a college friend, her diamond ring flashing under the lights. She looked so genuinely happy that guilt washed over me. Maybe my suspicions were just paranoia born from stress and exhaustion. Perhaps there was nothing between Matthew and Brooke. I was probably overthinking innocent interactions. When the dance mercifully ended, I returned to our table. Caleb was waiting for me, his small face tight with nervous energy, Lily's tablet clutched in his hands. "Mom, we need to go right now," he whispered urgently, grabbing my hand. Around us, guests chatted and laughed, the music pulsing through the room. I managed to smile, trying not to draw attention despite my racing heart. "Why, sweetheart?" Caleb quietly unlocked the tablet and opened the photo gallery. "Look at this." When I saw the screen, the world seemed to stop spinning. There, in high-definition clarity, was a photo of Matthew and Brooke standing intimately close in the hotel lobby, their hands clasped together. The timestamp showed yesterday evening, during Matthew's work emergency. My blood turned to ice as I swiped through more images. Matthew and Brooke embracing in a secluded hallway, sitting close in his car in the parking garage, her hand on his thigh. I borrowed Lily's tablet to play my game, and a notification from Dad's Instagram DMs came in. Caleb explained in a hushed voice. I tapped it by accident, and there were all these messages and pictures between Dad and Brooke. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. "Caleb, you." "I'm sorry, Mom." Tears welled in his eyes, making him look even younger. But I knew Dad was doing something bad. Or Jackson. I pulled myself together and hugged my son tightly. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Thank you for telling me." Caleb continued, his voice small but determined. "Yesterday, when we checked into the hotel, I saw Dad and Brooke talking by the elevators. When Dad saw me watching, he looked scared and they moved apart really fast." My hands trembled as I scrolled through more evidence. The final photo showed Brooke passing Matthew what looked like a hotel keycard, followed by private messages that left no doubt. Their relationship had been going on for nearly 2 years. Even more shocking, Jackson appeared completely unaware. "Mom, Dad, and Brooke are doing something really bad." "Poor Jackson. Can we please go home?" Caleb pleaded, his voice breaking. My head spun with chaos and disbelief. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, the trust we built as a family, everything was collapsing around me. And my sister, the person I'd protected and supported my entire life, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way. We'd always had our rivalries growing up, but I never imagined this level of betrayal. Around us, the reception continued in full swing, laughter, clinking glasses, music, but to my ears, it all sounded like distant noise from underwater. I sat frozen, unable to reconcile the joyful celebration with my shattered reality. Caleb tugged my hand gently. "Mom, are you okay?" I looked into my son's worried eyes and felt a surge of love and pride. This small child, with his innate sense of right and wrong, had shouldered an adult burden because he knew the truth mattered. It was time for me to be as brave as my son. "Caleb, thank you for showing me this. You're a brave and honest child." I hugged him tightly. "But we can't leave just yet. First, I need to tell Jackson the truth." "Jackson?" Caleb's eyes widened with anxiety. "Yes, he deserves to know before he makes a huge mistake. This is an adult problem. But thanks to you, I can do the right thing." I took a deep breath, wiped away the trace of tears threatening my makeup, and stood up with newfound resolve. Taking Caleb's small hand in mine, I said, "Let's go together." We pushed through the celebrating crowd, scanning the room for the unsuspecting groom. Caleb and I found Jackson in a quieter corner of the reception hall. He was engaged in conversation with several business associates, champagne in hand, looking every bit the successful groom. I took a deep breath, squeezing Caleb's hand for courage. "Jackson, could I speak with you for a moment?" I said, working to keep my voice steady and face composed. "It's important." Jackson seemed to sense the urgency in my expression. "Of course." He politely excused himself from the group and walked over to us. "What's wrong? Is everything okay with Brooke?" I placed my hand protectively on Caleb's shoulder and said, "Could we step outside?" "Somewhere private." The three of us left the noisy reception, moving through the French doors that led to the hotel's landscape garden terrace. The November night air was crisp and cold, a stark contrast to the warmth inside. Music and laughter filtered out from the reception, oddly distant now. In a secluded corner beside an ornamental fountain, I faced Jackson directly. "I have something difficult to tell you," I began, struggling to find the right words. "Caleb discovered something you need to see." I unlocked the tablet with trembling fingers and handed it to Jackson. "Please look at these photos." Jackson took the device, his brow furrowed in confusion. As he swiped through the images, his expression transformed before my eyes, first puzzlement, then dawning comprehension, and finally raw pain and anger. His jaw tightened as he continued to swipe through photo after damning photo. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his normally confident voice now hoarse with emotion. "I don't know," I answered honestly, my heart breaking for him. "Caleb found these messages by accident. He was just trying to do the right thing." Jackson exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping as he handed the tablet back to me. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words, staring at the fountain's flowing water. "I thought you had the right to know the truth before you." I couldn't finish the sentence. Jackson nodded, his composure remarkable despite the circumstances. "Actually, I've felt something wasn't right for weeks," he confessed, running a hand through his carefully styled hair. "Brooke constantly deleting messages when I walked in, sudden work emergencies, changes in our physical relationship. But I had no proof, and I thought I was just being paranoid." He looked down at Caleb and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for being brave enough to show us the truth, Caleb. That took real courage." At that moment, a sharp voice cut through the night air. "What's going on here?" I turned to see Brooke and Matthew standing at the garden entrance, having apparently followed us outside. Brooke wore a look of confusion on her perfectly made-up face, while Matthew stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the tablet in my hands. "What are you all talking about?" Brooke demanded, her voice rising as she approached us. Her steps faltered as she registered Jackson's expression. Jackson looked at her, his face now calm and resolute. "The truth has finally come to light," he said quietly but firmly. He gestured toward the tablet. "I never expected to discover you've been sleeping with Elaine's husband on our wedding day." The color drained from Brooke's face beneath her makeup. "What are you talking about?" Matthew stepped forward quickly. "Jackson, this is all a misunderstanding. Brooke and I were just discussing the construction project her firm is handling." "Enough," I interrupted, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and pain. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, trust and loyalty. You two betrayed all of that without a second thought." Brooke lunged forward, reaching for the tablet, but Jackson intercepted it first and scrolled to a specific message thread. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Told Jackson I have a late meeting with clients." He read aloud, his voice cutting like steel. "So this is the important client meeting you had last night when I was with my parents?" A heavy silence fell over our small group. Caleb pressed himself against my side, his small hand gripping mine tightly. Brooke suddenly crumpled, tears streaking her perfect makeup. "No, it's not what you think." "Then what is it exactly?" I asked, the hurt making my voice shake. "Why my husband, Brooke?" "Of all people?" Brooke's expression transformed from anguish to anger in an instant. "You've always had everything." She exploded, years of resentment pouring out. "You were always the perfect daughter, the responsible one, the smart one, the one with the stable life and perfect family. I've lived in your shadow my entire life. Matthew was the only one who actually saw me, who understood what it's like to be overlooked and underappreciated." I stood speechless, the accusation hitting me like a physical blow. While I had spent years envying my sister's freedom and success, she had apparently been envying what I thought was my ordinary life. The irony was bitter and stunning. Jackson turned to the hotel, his decision evident in his posture. "The wedding is canceled. I'll handle the announcements and apologize to our guests," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "A marriage cannot be built on such betrayal and lies," he added. Matthew finally stepped toward me, his face pleading. "Elaine, please, just let me explain. We never meant for this to happen." "Enough." I cut him off, my voice suddenly calm and clear. "Our marriage is over, Matthew. For the children's sake, I won't make a scene tonight. Pack your things and be gone by morning." Caleb looked up at his father, confusion and heartbreak written across his small face. I squeezed his hand gently and said, "Let's go get Lily and head home, sweetheart." Before walking away, I turned to my sister one last time. A real family supports and protects each other. Brooke, they don't betray each other for selfish desires. You are my sister, and I've always loved you despite our differences. I can't hate you, but I don't want you in my life anymore. I left the garden with Caleb, not looking back at the ruins of what had once been my marriage and my closest family relationship. Behind us, Jackson was speaking firmly to Brooke and Matthew, but I couldn't bear to listen to any more. The road ahead would be painful and difficult, but as a nurse, I'd learned long ago that healing only begins once the infection is exposed to light. Building a new life based on honesty and trust would ultimately be far better than continuing to live in a beautiful lie. 6 months later, I stood in the driveway of my new Chicago townhouse, unloading luggage from my SUV. The divorce was finalized last month, and spring air carried promise of new beginnings. "Caleb, Lily, bring your bags inside," I called. The children hurried over with their weekend duffels, just back from visiting their father. I now worked part-time at the hospital while building a counseling practice, using my psychology degree to help families in crisis. Caleb was recovering through therapy, but still occasionally asked, "What Dad did with Brooke wasn't my fault, right?" The doorbell rang while I prepared snacks. Jackson stood at my door with a bunch of flowers, a housewarming gift. A surprising friendship had developed between us after the canceled wedding. Both wounded by the same betrayal, we'd avoided each other until he invited me for coffee one February afternoon. "Thank you for telling me the truth that day," he said as we sat in my living room. "It was painful, but better than building a life on lies." He watched Caleb playing nearby. "Your son is remarkable. You've raised him with an extraordinary moral compass." "It was an experience no child should face, but he's healing," I replied. The children were slowly reconnecting with Matthew through supervised visits. Caleb struggled most, sometimes having nightmares about the wedding day. "I understand Dad loves me," he'd said recently, "but why can't you be together again if he's sorry?" I discovered online that Matthew was dating someone new, while Brooke had relocated to Boston. Their relationship had collapsed weeks after the wedding disaster. On Christmas Eve, as the children arranged presents under our tree, the doorbell rang. Brooke stood on my doorstep, thinner and subdued, in simple clothes without her usual perfect appearance. "Can we talk?" she asked hesitantly. "I ended things with Matthew months ago. Everything was a terrible mistake." After a moment of internal conflict, I opened the door wider. "The kids would probably like to see you." It's Christmas Eve, after all. When Caleb saw his aunt, he gave a cautious wave. "Merry Christmas, Brooke. What makes a real family isn't just blood ties, but trust, honesty, and sometimes forgiveness." My son's courage had taught us all to value authentic relationships over comfortable illusions. As I watched my sister kneel to speak with my children, I recognized we'd taken the first step toward healing, not erasing wounds, but transforming them into something more honest through our shared capacity for both failure and growth.